All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving deep into India's economy for 2025. Now, it's a fascinating story of really impressive growth, but it's all happening against a backdrop of global uncertainty. So the big question is, how is India managing to sail through these pretty turbulent global waters?
So let's kick things off with this. The official word from India's finance ministry is one of, well, calm confidence. Steady as she goes. That's a really powerful statement suggesting stability and resilience. But what does that stability actually look like when you get up close?
Okay, this number right here, this is really at the heart of the whole story. A projected GDP growth of 6.4%. In a world that's facing a lot of economic headwinds, that number puts India way up there, one of the fastest growing major economies on the planet. It kind of sets the stage for everything else we're about to unpack.
So, here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start with a snapshot of the economy, then we'll dive into the powerful engines that are really driving that growth. And after that, we'll take a hard look at the risks on the horizon, so you get the full, balanced picture.
All right, first up, India's economic snapshot. And honestly, the best way to picture what's happening is to think of a really steady ship, but it's navigating some seriously choppy waters.
When you put these numbers together, they tell a really compelling story. That strong 6.4% growth is being helped by inflation cooling down to 4.9%. Foreign direct investment is up by almost 18%, which shows a ton of global confidence. And those massive forex reserves? Think of that as the ship's buffer, its shock absorber. It's what helps keep things steady when the waves get rough.
And right here is where you can really see those choppy waters we've been talking about. On one side, you've got these major global headwinds blowing. The U.S. economy actually shrank, trade tensions are high, and manufacturing is slowing down worldwide. But then, on the other side, you see India's domestic strengths just holding firm. Strong consumer demand, incredible 12.8% growth in services, and a resilient agricultural sector.
So that begs the question, right? What exactly is powering this economy forward with all that external pressure? Let's get into the engines of growth. Right. So, while the big picture looks steady, the real story, the real energy, is coming from these two incredibly powerful engines driving everything forward. We're talking about a full-on digital revolution and a massive green industrial push. Let's start with the digital side. Okay, let's dive into that first engine, the digital and tech boom. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this is a full-blown technological revolution. Check this out. It all kicks off with this number, 87%. That is India's fintech adoption rate, the highest in the entire world. What that means is digital finance isn't some niche thing for techies. Nope, it's woven into the fabric of daily life for hundreds of millions of people. And that massive adoption rate, well, it's fueling an absolutely staggering future. The fintech market alone is projected to be worth over $2 trillion by 2030. A number that big just screams investor confidence and shows you the sheer scale of this opportunity. And listen, this isn't just about software and apps. India is making a huge play in hardware too. The semiconductor market is projected to top $100 billion by 2030. It's a clear signal that India wants to be a central player in the global electronics supply chain. So what's happening here is that this boom is firing on all cylinders. You've got this perfect storm of factors. Huge global demand for Indian tech services, government policies that are really supportive, a massive domestic e-commerce market, and you have an IT sector that's already a heavyweight, contributing around 8% to the entire country's GDP. That's huge. All right, on to that second engine of growth, the green and industrial push. This is really all about building the physical nuts and bolts for a more sustainable future. I mean, just take a look at these growth projections. Renewables are set to grow at a powerful 18 to 25%. But the EV sector? That's on a whole other level, with a projected compound annual growth rate of over 40%. I mean, wow! That is just explosive growth, signaling a massive shift in transportation. And, just like we saw with the tech boom, this isn't happening by accident. It's being actively fueled by government policy. Things like Make in India, the National Green Hydrogen Mission, and strong support for EVs are all working together to create this really attractive environment for investment and expansion. And it's all aimed at that huge goal,
500 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2030.
Okay, so that brings us to our final and maybe most important section, the risks on the horizon. We've seen all the strengths, we've seen the powerful engines, but is it really all smooth sailing?
It's such a critical question, right? Because while those headline numbers look fantastic, to get the full picture, you have to look at the challenges hiding under the surface. And this quote, this really gets to the heart of the matter. Yeah, inflation is eased, but consumer demand is uneven. People are still buying high-end stuff, but the everyday mass-market products are under pressure. So what does that tell you? It points to a pretty cautious consumer out there.
And you can see that caution playing out in a few key areas. First, we're seeing foreign portfolio investors, that's the hot money, pulling out, lured away by higher bond yields in the U.S. At home, credit growth has slowed down, which suggests that both borrowers and lenders are being careful. Plus, that global slowdown we talked about earlier, that could absolutely put a damper on demand for Indian exports. And on top of all that, there are some concerns about the stock market being overvalued.
So really, this brings us to the central tension of India's whole economic story right now. On one hand, you have these incredibly powerful domestic engines firing away in tech and green industries, but on the other, you've got some very real risks, both from what's happening globally and from that cautious feeling at home. And how these two opposing forces balance each other out, well, that's what's going to define the story of 2025.
Which leaves us with this final big picture thought. With such powerful domestic engines pushing forward, but these undeniable global storms on the horizon, the great question really is, how will India continue to navigate these tricky economic waters? The answer to that question isn't just for this year. It's going to define India's trajectory for the rest of the decade.